Welcome to Natural Habitat Adventures Daily Dose of Nature. Today's topic, what to expect on our Grand Canyon, Bryce, and Zion photo expedition. Presented by NatHab Expedition Leader, Jen Campman. I'm your host, Rob Bess. Thank you so much for being here with us today. Take it away, Jen.
Thanks, Rob. And thank you, everyone, for tuning in today. If you're tuning in to watch live or watching this on a recording, I appreciate your interest and thank you to NatHab for hosting this webinar, of course. But just to jump off to get started here, I'm Jen Campman. I've been an expedition leader with NatHab for several years now. And I have guided some of their itineraries all across North America, Alaska, Glacier and Waterton Lakes in Canada, down in Florida, up in Maine, and of course, canyons, one of my favorites. I'm deeply passionate about this part of the world for many reasons. But for me in particular, leading trips here it feels like I'm coming home. This is actually where I grew up in Utah, going to high school and college. And southern Utah and northern Arizona were kind of my backyard playground as I was, learning to photograph landscapes and learning who I was in a way. So yeah, this is one of my absolute favorite places. And in fact, this is actually where I started my guiding career, was in the American Southwest, where I learned to backpack and recreate outdoors. But while I was spending all this time playing out here in the desert, I truthfully fell in love with ecology here. This is where I discovered all these amazing adaptations that desert plants have to survive such harsh, dynamic weather regimes, and where, I learned that animals can even survive these extreme, conditions and have learned to evolve and adapt to live in these kind of environments. So I was mesmerized from the start, and whether, of course, it was the amazing downward spiraling call of the canyon wren, or if it was just the, sheer magnitude of the landscapes before me, these huge, unfathomably large landscapes. They are very humbling. But these areas, as you can tell, very important to me, very special, and, keeps me coming back time and time again. And NatHab, of course, is awesome. NatHab has a top-notch itinerary exploring this part of the world, arguably one of the of planet Earth. And there's honestly, thrill to photograph, I must say. Just fair warning, it is a little bit of a never-ending quest. There is just so much to see, so much to capture, so much amazing, warm desert light to photograph with. So it's really a joy. I'm really excited about this trip and excited to be telling you all about, what you can expect on this trip today. But to jump right in to get started, I want to talk about the where and the why. Where exactly does our Grand Canyon, Bryce, and Zion photo expedition take place, and why? Why is that? Why are we going there? First and foremost, the American Southwest. I've already sort of name dropped this, but this is where we're honing in on, is the American Southwest. And loosely defined, the American Southwest is made up of five major desert ecoregions within North America. So yes, North America does have five distinct desert regions, and we're gonna hone in on just one of those. So we've got, you can see my little diagram here on the right side of the screen. We've got our Great Basin Desert, our Mojave Desert, our Sonoran Desert, and over there in the brown on the right, that's the Chihuahuan Desert, and that yellow kind of in the mix of it all, that's the Colorado Plateau. And so this is where this expedition is taking place, specifically is on the Colorado Plateau. And even though it's not named a desert, it is a desert region. It's a high elevation desert, what we call a cold desert. And this is the second largest plateau in the world, second behind the Tibetan Plateau. So really a phenomenal area. And the Colorado Plateau, it's, as I mentioned, it's quite large, second largest in the world, but it's a big geographic region spanning roughly 130,000 square miles, and it does have this amazing, distinct high desert ecology, um, and very unique geology. And the plateau itself is consisted of a lot of smaller plateaus, smaller uplifts, that are then dissected into smaller canyons and mesas and basins, all across sort of the Four Corners region of the United States. That's where Utah, Colorado, New Mexico, and Arizona meet. And geologic research shows us that this region was last at sea level more than 65 million years ago, when the uplift first began. This is kind of the same time that the Rocky Mountains were forming. And since that uplift began of this giant platform, this giant plateau, since then it's risen about 6,500 feet, and erosion is now the dominant force at play. And there's been several thousand feet of rock that have already been removed within like the last 30 million years. So really, again, unique geology. And the cutting of the rivers, that has formed some of these amazing canyons of the Southwest, the cutting of the rivers is actually quite a bit younger than this uplift activity. So the cutting of the rivers that formed the canyons began maybe about 6 million years ago. So relatively, young geologically speaking. For the time being, it is now geologically stable, and one of the most intriguing geologic features of the Colorado Plateau is simply how this massive, thick chunk of the Earth's crust maintained relative conformity and stability throughout the plateau, without, much in the way of deconformities. And there's it's again, it's kind of sandwiched right in between, where you had this incredibly violent uplifting of the Rocky Mountains to the north and the west, as well as the incredible stretching and expansiveness of the Great Basin over to the west. So it's kind of right in between these areas that saw all this geologic action, and the Colorado Plateau itself is somewhat of an anomaly because it's kind of remained in place over time, all one big chunk of the Earth's crust. More specifically, like, I've kind of touched on why, the geology is unique, but really, I think that this is just such a fascinating part of this landscape, and what makes it so desirable to photograph is this unique geologic past. First and foremost, there's obviously plate tectonics at play here. That's, believe it or not, a relatively new scientific understanding since like the 60s or 70s. We've finally come to the conclusion that the crust of the Earth is broken up into a lot of smaller chunks, and these chunks are essentially floating on the molten lava core that makes up our planet Earth. And as these plates move and shift over time, obviously a lot is happening. But this is all happening over hundreds of millions of years. Kind of hard to wrap our mind around. But again, so plate tectonics is at play here. This is a major geologic force that helped form this amazing part of the world. But really, it's what helped lay down all these layers of sediments in this American Southwest desert. So over these vast periods of time, we had inland seas and lakes and waterways that would inundate the land and then dry up and drain away and then enter and inundate over and over again. So you got layers of sediments that were deposited again over vast periods of time. There was even a period of time when this part of the world was a massive desert. Technically, it's a desert today, but it would have been what geologists think was a sand dune sea. Pretty wild to imagine. And it's believed that it would have been much larger than the Sahara Desert is today. So that was one brief chapter in the geologic past of the Colorado Plateau, as well as some more recent volcanic activity. And altogether, this, laying down of sediments in different ways over different periods of time has created what we like to call the geologic layer cake of the Colorado Plateau. And more specifically, so yes, our trip is taking place on the Colorado Plateau of the American Southwest, one of North America's 5 desert regions. But more specifically, we are visiting the Grand Staircase. And this is a unique geologic feature of the Colorado Plateau. So this is specifically down to the point where we will be exploring over the course of 8 days, taking photos. And so the Grand Staircase is quite a phenomenon. As you can see here, I've got a nice cross section up on the screen. The left side of the screen is going to be north, the right side will be south, and all along there you can see again tons of different layers of different types of sediments spanning again hundreds of millions of years. Really amazing stuff. So the Grand Staircase, like I said, it's this unique geologic feature of the Colorado Plateau. So yes, it is indeed an immense sequence of sedimentary rocks, or sedimentary steps, layers that stretch for about 100 miles, beginning, you begin up at the top of the staircase in Bryce Canyon. These are going to be the highest and the youngest layers of rocks. So the rocks that we will see up in Bryce Canyon and what are called the pink cliffs of the Grand Staircase, these are around 35 million years old. And then over the course of our trip, we start at the top of the Grand Staircase. We head down to somewhere near the middle of the Grand Staircase to Zion National Park, and that's where we'll head down into the bottom of a massive slot canyon. And that's kind of sandwiched in between the gray cliffs and the white cliffs, and we'll be getting into some older layers of rock. You can tell here on the cross section where Zion is. And then at the end, we're going to keep going down the staircase, past the Vermilion Cliffs, past the Chocolate Cliffs, the most delicious of cliffs, and then back up onto another smaller plateau. This is the Kaibab Plateau, and that's where we will find ourselves at the north rim of the Grand Canyon. And the Grand Canyon, so this is kind of considered the bottom of the Grand Staircase, or where that staircase starts up to the top where Bryce is at. And these are some of the oldest rock layers that we will be seeing. Some of the rocks that we're going to be standing and walking on up at the top of the rim are anywhere from 200 plus million years old. And there are sections of the Grand Canyon way deep down in the bottom, if you were at water level, where you could find rocks dating back to 2 billion years old. It's wild stuff. So a very cool place to be exploring for a few days. And the Grand Staircase too, in most places of the world, I should say, this is like a book, these layers of sediments. It's very unique in that it's preserving so much of the Earth's history, arguably more than most places on Earth. And geologists will study these layers, almost like reading a book, like reading a book detailed chapter by detailed chapter. And in most places of the world, this book has been damaged severely, oftentimes by, mountains rising, by the scouring of glaciers, you name it. All sorts of geologic activity have often disarticulated these layers from one another. Sometimes whole pages are missing. But the Grand Staircase, and particularly the lower part of the staircase where the Grand Canyon lies, these layers are remarkably intact. And this is evidence of 600 million plus years of continuous Earth history all in one place. Maybe a paragraph missing here and there, but largely intact. And these layers are what make photographing this part of the world so amazing. So many different colors, the way they reflect the light, and water. This whole area, the third kind of part of our what makes this area so geologically unique and interesting, is that yes, you do have all those sedimentary layers, but it's the erosion that has made them visible to us. So the relatively newer down cutting of the rivers, 6 million years ago, just the other day, and water in the form either liquid or solid, ice and snow, this stuff has been eroding away that relatively soft sedimentary rock, and allowing us to partake and feast our eyes and our camera lenses on this amazing landscape. And so, like I said, specifically, we're exploring the Grand Staircase, which is a geologic feature of the Colorado Plateau of the American Southwest. And again, the three main portions of our photo expedition that we're exploring are Bryce Canyon, Zion National Park, and Grand Canyon, the North Rim. So On to the next. How is a photo expedition different? How is a photo expedition different than our regular expeditions with natural habitat? And first and foremost, this is, guests on our photo expeditions, all guests have an interest, some level of interest in photography, anywhere, from beginner just with a smartphone all the way up to pros with all the fancy gear, you name it. But these are, people coming on our photo expeditions are people that are generally interested in photography and learning more and practicing photography. And obviously, the main focus of this itinerary, although it is relatively similar to a regular departure, our photo departures, we are really focused on photography and photographic opportunities. We also spend quite some time discussing photography gear, camera settings, photographic techniques, as well as post processing, stuff like that. It is also your expedition leaders. Your expedition leaders, again, on any of your NatHab trips, they are going to be premier naturalists, but our expedition leaders on our photo departures, they do have that extra skill set of being skilled photographers, and are able to also provide expert instruction and personalized guidance one-on-one for photographers that span, again, all ability levels. And another great thing about the photo departures for these expeditions, we do have smaller groups. Instead of having 13 or 14 guests on a regular departure, we limit these departures to 10 guests. And so that allows for about 5 to 6 people per van, per NatHab van. So plenty of space for, sitting by a window, having your camera gear next to you. And also just a better ratio for expedition leaders to guests, a little bit more one-on-one for photo instruction. Another thing, our photo expeditions are scheduled, for precise times of the season where we feel that photography is optimal, so this is when the seasons are changing. So we do this season for canyons, we have a spring photo expedition departure as well as a fall photo expedition departure. And so these are when, you're going either in spring. You've got remnant patches of snow, maybe the beginnings of blooming wildflowers. And in the fall, you've got those greens fading to some really amazing golden colors. You wouldn't think that this part of the world has fall colors, but let me tell you, it sure does. In our lower elevations, you'll see that the cottonwoods turn these amazing golden colors, and in our higher elevations, the aspens. Another great thing is that choosing these times of the year for our photography departures is typically fewer crowds as well. Temperatures are a bit cooler this time of year. Weather is more variable, and so because of that, we do often see fewer people. These trips, these expeditions are also a slower pace. We have patience. We take time for changing light and for changing weather and conditions, animal behavior, and we also take the time to set up and discuss our gear and our settings, and just, really immerse ourselves in our photography. And on our photo expeditions, we do definitely have early mornings, some later evenings. Our expedition leaders do respect their travelers' valuable and precious time, and we will often make the most of each day and try to maximize our guest experiences. But keep in mind that every activity, although the days are full, every activity is optional. You just need to talk one-on-one with your expedition leader, and they'll often go over that at your welcome dinner as well. But every activity is optional, but we definitely maximize the day for guest enjoyment. And spring and fall photo departures, again, like I said, keep in mind with those early mornings and later evenings, some cold temperatures and variable weather. And another thing with these photo departures is that our meal time is often structured around the best times for photographing. So keep in mind that there will be a few activities before breakfast and after dinner. So prepare yourself maybe for a slightly later breakfast, a slightly earlier dinner. And also, if you've ever traveled with NatHab before, you will know that we are well stocked with snacks and drinks. You will not go hungry on a NatHab trip, but just to keep that in mind. And those are kind of our major differences. So in a lot of ways, the photo expeditions, they are definitely a more thorough and comprehensive approach to photographing the trip. You can get great photographs on any of our departures, but with our photo expeditions, we're definitely taking the extra time, the extra effort to walk away from that trip with a memory card full of some awesome shots. And next, I'd like to talk about the itinerary itself. Where exactly, I touched on where we're going, but how exactly we're going to execute this 8-day adventure. And day one is pretty straightforward. This is, arriving into St. George, Utah, getting settled into the hotel and showing up for orientation and welcome dinner. The lodging for St. George is also going to be the Hyatt Place in St. George. Very comfortable, close to the airport. Good jumping off point for our trip. And days 2 and 3 of this itinerary take us to our first national park, Bryce Canyon National Park. And this is like the top of the Grand Staircase. This is where our adventure really begins, is at Bryce Canyon. And so days 2 and 3, to start off, different activities and photographic opportunities in Bryce. First of all, you'll be traveling from St. George, Utah to Bryce Canyon. For these, we do have a few different travel stints throughout this departure. Just, this is kind of the Grand Staircase is a large area. So to get from one national park to the other, it takes a little bit of time. And how exactly you get there and what stops you make on the way depend a lot upon the season, what kind of weather you're having, whether you're the spring departure, the fall departure for the photo trips, your expedition leader, as well as the group composition and group interests. So those are kind of customizable to a certain extent, the way in which you will, specifically travel from point A to point B. But that's the first step for days 2 and 3, is getting to Bryce, obviously. And along the way, like I said, we will stop. It just depends on, which trip, where exactly you're stopping. While we're in Bryce, we're also going to be hiking. We're hoping to leave the edge of the rim and travel down into the hoodoos themselves for photographing. Really amazing to be amongst the hoodoos. The hoodoos, they're these, unique geologic features of Bryce Canyon that have been eroded, again by wind and water. And we'll dive into the nitty-gritty of the geology while we're actually out there in the field taking photographs of these things. But more activities and photographic opportunities in Bryce, of course, are sunrise and sunset. Bryce is a wonderful spot, particularly for sunrise. It's an entirely east-facing ridge of those pink cliffs that it's known as the Paunsaugunt Plateau, one of the smaller plateaus on the Colorado Plateau. And this where Bryce Canyon National Park is, it faces east, and you're up there high on the rim of Bryce Canyon. Excellent for morning and evening photography. And of course, we have a private scenic helicopter flight through Bryce Canyon. This is an awesome opportunity from some really unique aerial photography shots, an aspect that many people don't get to experience, let alone capture on a trip. And we'll have some stargazing opportunities as well. This is a good chance to dabble with astrophotography if you're into that. Of course, we're going to be exploring the park road and looking for wildlife, some of the wildlife that we're hoping to see, but I will caveat here. I will say, keep in mind, this is a desert. This is arguably, the canyons, Grand Canyon, Bryce, and Zion are arguably more of a landscape photography destination. A lot of great, amazing landscapes. And just the nature of it being a high desert and being a harsh environment, oftentimes wildlife can be scarce. But we, expedition leaders, we have the local know-how. So we're doing our best to get eyes on these amazing animals when we can. But it can be a challenge in the desert. But some of the animals we might potentially be able to see while we're in Bryce include our Utah prairie dog in the top left there. These are a unique species to the Bryce Canyon area, very fun. And also the pronghorn, the bottom right, that is another amazing animal that we would love to see out there. Again, not guaranteed, but we're going to be looking for them. Also potential to see chipmunks and ground squirrels, lots of those guys running around Bryce Canyon, as well as birds. Of course, like we've got a western meadowlark here that we spotted out in the sagebrush. So there are critters out there, and we're going to be working to see them. But again, keep in mind, mostly landscapes out there in the desert, but with the occasional wildlife. And of course, all of this is weather permitting, I should say. Weather definitely dictates what we're doing for the day and where we're photographing and what we're photographing. But with that, weather permitting, sometimes when a storm is rolling in over these massive landscapes, it can make for some pretty sweet photography before the storm is actually there. So just keep that in mind. And of course, lodging for Bryce Canyon, we're going to be staying at the Bryce Canyon Lodge, which is very conveniently located on the rim of Bryce Canyon in the park. Historic. It's a historic lodge. It's got some really amazing rustic charm, but very conveniently located for us. And another major perk to, these expeditions with Nat Hab is staying in these park lodges. Days 4 and 5. This is the second of our 3 national parks. We'll be visiting Zion National Park. And some of the activities and photographic opportunities that we will have here are, of course, first traveling from Bryce Canyon to Zion. Once we're in Zion, we're going to be going on a few different hikes and hoping to photograph like these amazing, in Zion National Park, you're in the bottom of a massive slot canyon. So you've got these sandstone walls towering 2,000 to 3,000 feet above your head. So these canyon walls make for amazing photographs, particularly in the middle of the day. This is actually where some of our best light is, since we're kind of down in the bottom of a canyon. In the middle of the day, we're looking for photographing the canyon walls and the narrows, where we're going to be doing some hiking. And also, this is a great opportunity to kind of zoom in on the little things. Some really amazing wildflowers here in the hanging gardens, and even petroglyphs. And we, of course, are going to be exploring the park road. There's also this amazing cross-bedding of these. These are ancient petrified sand dunes from that short blip in time when this part of the world, I mean short blip, a few 100 million years, when this area was a massive sea of sand dunes. And so these petrified over time and have this amazing cross-bedding where you can actually tell what direction the prevailing winds were blowing way back when. And again, we can dive into the nerdy geologic stuff when we're out there taking photographs, but this is the kind of stuff, these little details, it's just so fun to photograph in Zion National Park. But of course, we're going to explore the park road here as well, looking for wildlife. Again, it is a desert, harder to see wildlife here. However, I will say that Zion National Park, oftentimes we have luck seeing spotting critters here, is because we have the amazing Virgin River, which flows right through the bottom of Zion Canyon. And so it is a little bit like an oasis in the desert. And so this does sometimes work in our favor with wildlife. Some of the species that we're hoping to see out here include our rock squirrel, bottom left. These guys are actually pretty common, the rock squirrels, and they're actually somewhat naughty. The desert bighorn sheep, this is one we would love to spot. We're going to be looking diligently for these amazing adaptations, again, to live in this harsh environment on the sides of these towering cliffs. Other birds, including turkeys that we find in the canyon, and even sometimes golden eagles, and mule deer. And for our lodging for the Zion area, depending on your departure, you're either going to be staying at the Zion Lodge, which is in the park, or at the Spring Hill Suites in Springdale, which is just outside the park gate. Both are very nice accommodations, and both are very conveniently located. It's just a matter of what departure that you're on. And for days 6 and 7, this is our grand finale. We'll be visiting the North Rim of Grand Canyon National Park, which I'm very excited about. In years past, we have taken trips to the South Rim as well as the North Rim. But this year we've decided we're just sticking with the North Rim. And, there's a big perk of that, photographically speaking, I should say, is fewer crowds. Again, this is a part of the park, whether it's your first time seeing Grand Canyon or you've been there a bunch, the North Rim is arguably like the best to see, just because it's the quieter part of the park. It's the less visited part of the park. Not as many people that travel to Grand Canyon get to see these unique perspectives of the canyon. And so again, makes for some really, really awesome photography. While we're in Grand Canyon, again, more activities and photographic opportunities that we'll be seeking out, of course, traveling from Zion to Grand Canyon. And we've got our optional mule ride experience. Keep in mind, all activities are optional, but this is a very fun and, again, unique way to see the canyon for those that are interested and enjoy riding horseback or mules. It's good fun. But again, optional for those that are interested. Every guest I have seen that comes back on the mule ride comes back with a big smile on their face. So I'm you know not dissuading, but it is, it's adventurous but good fun. Let's see. So in other activities, photographic opportunities, of course, we're back up high on the rim of the Grand Canyon. So this is going to be more excellent opportunities for sunrise and sunset photography. And of course, hiking along the rim, getting rim views all along the way. Some wildlife that we would like to see here in the Grand Canyon that we're going to be looking for as we explore the park roads are our endemic kaibab squirrel over on the left. These guys are remarkably beautiful. White tails, kind of that rusty brown color on their back, little ear tufts. Really fun to photograph if we can find them. We'll be looking for them. So that's our kaibab squirrel. And we've got California condors that we can sometimes spot from the North Rim, as well as bison. And again, weather permitting, you never know when a storm's going to roll in, especially at those high elevations on the rim of the canyon. But you just got to make lemonade out of lemon sometimes. Sometimes it provides you with these, again, amazing opportunities to take a photo that you might not see on a perfectly bluebird day. So sometimes weather works with us, sometimes it works against us. But the Grand Canyon North Rim Lodge is where we will be staying while we're in the North Rim. Again, kind of the rustic historic charm that the national park lodges have. And just, you couldn't pick a better location. You're right on the rim, the rim of the Grand Canyon. Need I say more? Day 8, unfortunately, this is the end. These are our departures. We'll be making our way from the North Rim back to St. George, Utah. A little bit of a drive, and most people are departing, I believe, from midday on, either via, going to the airport or taking the shuttle to Las Vegas. After our trip, after you've gone on your way, you've gone home, this is where we've actually has just started implementing a photo share platform within like the last year or so. And this has been really helpful for our trips, especially for our photo expeditions. In the past, us expedition leaders would just kind of piece together a like collaborative Google Photos album and send that out to our guests. But now NatHab has taken it upon themselves to make an amazing photo and video sharing platform where at the end of your trip or during your trip, you're able to upload photos and videos, as well as everyone else in your group, including your expedition leader. And then at the end of the trip, it's just a great resource. You have all those photos and videos in one place, and you're able to, download and use and share whatever it is that you would like to. So the photo share platform is some exciting stuff that we'll be talking about on our expeditions as well. Weather and seasonality in this part of the world. I've mentioned, we're going to be at some higher elevations. So at Bryce is actually where we're starting out. We're getting it out of the way early. This is our highest elevations, 8,000 to 9,000 feet. So in our spring photo departure, you can expect highs between 55 and 70 degrees, lows between 20 and 35 degrees. Those mornings, those evenings for photography will be chilly. So pack and dress accordingly. For fall, kind of the same, just maybe slightly warmer, highs 60 to 75, lows 25 to 40. So again, cold mornings and evenings for photography, but well worth it, I tell you. And then Zion, we're going to get a quick reprieve from the cool temps. We head down into the bottom of that massive cut in the earth again. And around the bottom of the canyon, there will be right around 4,000 feet of elevation. And so here, temperatures are a bit warmer. In the spring, you can expect highs between 65 and 80, lows between 40 and 55. And fall departures kind of more like 75 to 90 in the middle of the day, 45 to 60 in the evenings and the mornings. And then Grand Canyon, we pop back up on top of the Colorado Plateau, or back on top of the Kaibab Plateau of the Colorado. And there we'll find ourselves back up around 8,000 feet. So again, spring, chilly, 60 to 70, lows 25 to 35, fall highs 65 excuse me, 65 to 75, lows 35 to 45. So just to kind of, lay that all out there, these photo departures, again, these are chosen for the specific times of year because they do allow for better photography, but they do come with, a little bit of weather and seasonality. But again, well worth it, I can assure you. Physicality for this trip. This is, the physical requirements that NatHab places on this trip. They define it as easy to moderate. So this adventure doesn't necessarily require a high degree of physical fitness, but guests should be able to walk at least 2 miles unassisted over uneven terrain and some inclines at altitude, of course. And generally speaking, we just don't want to confine ourselves to just the pullouts and the scenic vistas on the road. We want to just get out there just a little bit further. That's going to really enhance our photography as well. It's just to get off the well-beaten path. We want to explore some of the trails off the side there. So again, not a high degree of physical fitness, but again, you should be able to walk 2 miles unassisted. And keep in mind, all activities, again, are optional, so if there's like a hike in the middle of the day that, you've done all the other stuff, all the other activities, and you're like, I just want to relax, or I just want to go through my photos that I've already taken, or take a nap, enjoy your vacation, whatever it is, just talk one-on-one with your expedition leader and they can help accommodate you. And another note about seasonality and physical requirements is, again, this is a high arid desert. The sun can be intense at times, even when it's chilly. So just to kind of have that in the back of your mind as well. The sun is strong. And that kind of leads me into my next section here, is what to pack. What should you bring on your photo expedition? Of course, bring your camera. That's the most important piece of equipment for this expedition, is the camera. And the smartphone is totally fine. If that's what you're shooting with, more power to you. The best camera is the one you have in your hand. So just don't forget to pack your camera. Obviously, a smartphone will do, a point and shoot will do, and a DSLR or mirrorless will absolutely do. And yeah, smartphones are really getting to be impressive these days. They have some really amazing built-in features, like slow-mo and portrait mode and pano, even some editing stuff. And so if you're just shooting with the smartphone, I think you'd be kind of amazed at what you can gather from our photo expeditions, just how to shoot better on your smartphone. And oftentimes I'm utilizing both my mirrorless as well as my smartphone, so always handy to have. For a DSLR or mirrorless camera, though, something with interchangeable lenses, the lenses that I would recommend to pack are a standard wide angle zoom lens, something like a kit lens. That's going to be like an 18 to 55 millimeter for a crop sensor, maybe something more like 24 to 105 millimeters for a full frame sensor. But by standard, so I said standard wide angle zoom lens. By standard, what I mean is just that it's including a focal length of 35 millimeters or above, and wide angle meaning it includes focal lengths of 35 or below. So just kind of a little bit of a range there. And simply all I mean by zoom is just that it's not a prime lens. It's not a fixed focal length. It's adjustable, and you can adjust your focal length throughout that range. But yeah, you definitely want something that's got a little bit below 35 millimeters and a little bit above 35 millimeters at least. And then a telephoto lens. A lot of people might be thinking, a telephoto lens on a landscape photography departure, are you sure? And I'm absolutely sure. Something like a 1 to 400 even, or maybe a 70 to 200, this can be, absolutely crucial for some pretty killer landscape shots. Obviously, these are going to be helpful for wildlife shots should opportunities present themselves to us. But, with a telephoto lens, I oftentimes like to zoom in on, the more brightly lit areas of the landscape, like at a sunrise or sunset. And it really just adds another layer to your photography. So I definitely recommend packing your telephoto lens for this departure. Other optional accessories for photographing and photographic equipment are A tripod. If you've got a tripod, I would recommend packing it. This might come in handy when we're shooting in lower light, like in the mornings and in the evenings. It might also come in handy when we're utilizing slower shutter speeds, like if we're messing around with astrophotography or taking photos of the Virgin River as it's flowing, trying to capture some of that movement. So a tripod can definitely come in handy. If you've got one, I recommend packing it. An ultra wide lens, so something that's under like 18 millimeters, so it's like a 16 or a 14 millimeter lens, something like that. Not necessary, but definitely can be a lot of fun for photographing these massive landscapes. And also like in Zion, where you've got the big canyon walls towering over you, wide angle lenses can really help add an extra element. As well as macro lenses. I've had folks bring their macro lenses on these departures before for photographing different flowers or bugs or lizards, and it's good fun. So if you've got one, bring it. Polarizing filters, ND filters, these, a polarizer is going to help you reduce glare or haze. And our neutral density filters, it's like a sunglasses for your camera. This is physically decreasing the amount of light that's hitting your sensor, which allows you to kind of adjust and slow down your shutter speed whenever it's super bright in the middle of the day. So these kinds of things, they can come in handy. I would not say that they are necessary, but if you've got them, feel free to pack them and we'll play around with them. But yeah, not a necessity, but a fun addition to throw in your bag. And then of course, I would consider bringing your camera manual, digging that out, dusting it off. And oftentimes too, nowadays you can just do a quick Google and you can find an electronic version of your manual online and like save it to your phone or your computer so that you have it with you on your trip. That's very convenient sometimes. So definitely, think about going back through the manual, finding that, going through it, just familiarizing yourself with things, especially if it's been a while since you've used your camera. It might be good to brush up on stuff. Extra camera batteries are not a bad idea, as you want to make sure you're charging every night. And an extra battery can be handy, especially like in those cold temperatures where we're outside for a while in the mornings, photographing sunrise. Extra memory cards are also not a bad idea. And keep in mind, memory cards come in a lot of different shapes and sizes. So make sure that you have enough storage and you have the correct kind of card. I personally recommend a memory card that's probably at least 64 gigabytes, and something with a transfer speed of like 170 millibytes per second or so. So it's just, there's a lot of different kinds. Just make sure that you're doing your due diligence. You have a memory card that's going to work for your camera and that has enough storage. But definitely pro tip is, like I said, dust off that manual, pull out the manual, and pull out the camera before your expedition departs. I highly recommend just going out in the backyard and just refreshing your memory on different settings, and utilizing your manual, and just if you haven't had your camera cleaned in a while, go get it cleaned, all this stuff, but kind of getting it ready to go, familiarizing yourself, feeling ready for our expedition, for taking lots of photos. And then clothing, of course, I mentioned high elevations, cold temperatures. So we definitely want to be dressed appropriately. So bring plenty of layers, dress like an onion, think peeling off the layers. Anything from t-shirts for warmer, in the middle of the day temperatures, to a puffy and maybe even a rain jacket, just to help as like a windbreaker and extra layers for cold mornings and evenings. Warm socks, comfortable shoes for both hiking and standing in. And of course, like your Nat Hab buff or neck gaiter, it can be incredibly convenient for chilly temps or for excess sun. And gloves with some dexterity, a beanie, and a headlamp or a flashlight, not a bad idea, especially getting to locations early in the morning or staying out kind of later at night doing astrophotography. A headlamp or a flashlight can be handy. And luggage, this is, packing for the van. You should have your checked bag or a soft-sided duffel, either with or without wheels. And then you should have your carry-on bag, which really consists of a day pack with your important things in there, like your medications, your wallet, and a camera bag with your camera gear. And I also definitely recommend packing a reusable water bottle and a reusable thermos for like coffee or tea or hot cocoa, whatever you fancy. But those are kind of the main staples of luggage that we recommend bringing. And again, we do have a smaller group, spacious vans. You do have room to pack a camera bag with you for the day. And last but not least, some resources that I wanted to leave you off with. Of course, if you've got questions, put them in the chat and feel free to ask me here at the end of the webinar. But just from now until when your expedition begins, whether it's this year or next year, but NatHab's photography blog, the Natural Photographer blog at naturalphotographer.org, is a wonderful resource. They're always putting out new articles, lots of stuff, and they have a lot of articles specific to the Canyons region. There's also a great new podcast, the Wild Photographer podcast, is produced by another NatHab expedition leader, and he's even the chief officer of sustainability at NatHab, Court Whalen. He does a wonderful job. It's a great podcast. Highly recommend. Just little bite-sized bits of information on camera techniques and stuff. Your pre-departure briefing, this is sort of the booklet that NatHab mails to you before your departure. This is full of good information. And of course, these daily dose of nature webinars, just like this webinar. If you locate NatHab's YouTube page for their daily dose of nature webinars, you will find that there have been a lot of webinars already completed in the past, and many of them have to do with photography. So highly recommend checking that out. And, if some of those lenses, maybe you were like, oh man, I don't have that lens and I don't want to buy that lens, the wide angle lens, I don't want to buy that for just this one trip. What if I don't like it? Yada, yada. So there is a really great site, lensrentals.com. It's an easy online camera equipment rental site. They do more than just lenses. Like even if you wanted to rent, I think a tripod, they do. But it's easy, online, professional, and NatHab actually has a partnership with them right now. If you're interested in renting any kind of camera equipment, you can use the code NatHab15 for 15% off right now. Thank you, NatHab. And of course, like I said, your camera manual, again, don't be afraid to bust out the camera. Just get yourself familiar with it and get ready for our trip. Start messing around with some of those settings and just make sure, familiarize yourself. And then, of course, your adventure concierge, the NatHab Adventure Concierge. If you have questions going forward, you can always call the office and someone will be there eagerly awaiting to answer your call. And that is all I have for you. Thank you so much. And any questions?
All right, Jen, thank you so much. Now, before we start with the question and answer session, I would like to remind everyone that you can submit your questions via the question field in your control panel. All right, let's get to some of these questions. Jen, this looks like a really fun trip, but what if I'm not really a photographer? Is this still a good trip for me to come on?
Ooh, good question. Let's see. I would say, honestly, our photo departures, they are geared for those that have photography interest. So there is a chance that if you don't have much of an interest in photography, you might find yourself less interested in some of the topics that we're discussing, or when we're taking an hour to photograph sunrise, that kind of thing. I would keep that in mind. Not saying that you might actually end up enjoying it. It's just a slower pace, more time watching the light change. But there is that factor that we are there to take lots of photographs and to talk about camera gear and just nerd out on camera stuff and photography. And so there's a chance that might not pique your interest. So it's honestly a personal preference. I would encourage you to check out our regular departures, but not saying there's a chance you could enjoy our photo departures just the same. But it's kind of a personal preference. But that's what I would keep in mind, is that there is a heightened attention to photography.
Great. Thank you for letting us know about that. So if we're going to go up in one of those choppers, are the doors going to be off, or are we going to have to take pictures through a door?
Great question. Great question. The doors are on. We've we've looked into alternatives, but they keep the doors on. However, they keep the glass very clean. They clean it between each departure, and so yeah, that's never been an issue for us before. But doors are on. Seatbelts on. Doors on.
Great. Good to know. So will there be dark sky opportunities for us to take photographs?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. This part of North America, arguably has some of the darkest night skies in the world. Very little in the way of light pollution because we are kind of, those drive times, some of our travel times that we're getting from these national parks and stuff, we're really getting out there to some remote areas where there's very little in the way of development. And this really does allow for, half an hour after sunset, granted that you can still keep your eyes open after the long and invigorating day that we've had. No, it does make for some really excellent astrophotography. Again, weather permitting, we could have clouds, but if the skies are clear, more often than not, we get quite a show at night. Yeah.
So the photo sharing platform, is that available to non-travelers or only to those of us on the trip?
Great. No, that's a really good question. Thank you for asking that. I should clarify. This is just specific for your trip. So whenever you sign up for and execute an expedition with NatHab at the end of your expedition, you will have access. Well, really throughout the expedition, you're going to have access to the PhotoShare platform, and so there is a platform for each departure. So if you do a trip with NatHab in the spring to canyons, and then you do a trip in summer to Africa with NatHab, you're going to have two different photo share platforms, one for each trip. That way you can go back in and you can see yours as well as all of your fellow travelers and expedition leaders photos and videos all in one place for that trip, which is, it's very convenient. But yeah, that's good clarification just for those on the trip, and each photo share platform that is specific to your departure, that particular trip.
And will those photos be available for download, or do I have to get permission to do that?
No, another great clarification. Those are available for download. Yeah. So that's another thing to keep in mind. I always kind of address this at our orientation welcome dinner with my guests is like, keep in mind, this is an open sharing platform. You can upload your photos and videos, but keep in mind that others will have access and be able to download these and use them as they would like. So just keep that in mind. Some people are at such a professional level, they might not want to share all of their photos on a platform like that. But for most of us are pretty open to sharing there, and like especially us expedition leaders, take the photos, do what you want with them, enjoy.
Great. Thank you for clarifying that. So, is there a weight allowance on this trip? Should I be careful about how much I should pack?
Good question. Not a hard set weight limit. Really, the only weight limit we have is for the mule ride. Should you choose, they're saying that if you got to be 200 or under for your mule. But for as far as packing and your gear goes, no, there's not a hard set weight limit. But we do ask that you pack strategically. Obviously, there's a lot that you got to fit in your suitcase, especially if you're bringing a tripod and you're bringing all your warm weather gear and your cold weather gear. So just try to pack strategically, but there's not a hard set limit.
So, are we going to be using park shuttle services in Zion, or does NetHab have their own vehicles?
Another great question. No, so we do have our own vehicles, and we are going to be utilizing those for most of the time. However, there is one section of the park road in Zion National Park that is not accessible to personal vehicles. So there is a short part where we're going to be accessing a trailhead. We will be using the public shuttle system, which is honestly awesome. It has helped decrease traffic in the canyon, and sort of mitigate the erosion that was causing having so much foot traffic, and vehicle traffic in the back of the canyon where it really gets narrow. And they're propane powered, so they're it's a little better in the way of sustainability and having less of an effect on our climate. But yes, that is the one section where we'll be utilizing a public shuttle, and it's for the best and works just fine.
Do we go into the section of Zion near St. George?
Oh, good question. That's dependent on your expedition leader and seasonality. It depends. Some of our departures were able to do it. Actually, like the last 2 years, they had the road closed there in Kolob Canyon. That's what the area is known as. And Kolob Canyon had a road closure for construction, and I believe it just recently reopened. So, but that's kind of those travel sections, like where you're going to each national park. is that's kind of up to the discretion of your expedition leader, and they're going to base that decision on seasonality and weather, as well as group composition and what the group is up for.
Would that include Kodachrome and Snow Valley State Parks as well?
Yes, it sure would. Yeah. But those
Great.
are all awesome, awesome places that we strive to hit with most of our groups. I will say that.
Good to know. So if I am coming out on this trip, are there any good extensions that you could recommend to bookend with
Ooh,
this trip?
so many. There's so many. This is such a fun part of the world. And we're just, this is the tip of the iceberg, just this canyons of the American Southwest. But it is an amazing tip of the iceberg to explore and start off with. My recommendation, personally, I would probably recommend at the end of the trip, uh, maybe considering getting a rental car, and maybe going exploring some other somewhat nearby areas. Like we've got Arches National Park and Canyonlands National Park and Capitol Reef National Park. There's also some other cool spots over by Kanab, like Lower Antelope Canyon, which is quite popular with the photo crowd. Keep in mind, it's been a little overrun these days. That's a big reason why we don't often go there. Is it is a bit popular, but if you can get there at earlier parts of the day and like in the middle of a week or something, you might have better chances of less visitation around you. But Lower Antelope Canyon and Horseshoe Bend are some other awesome spots. And of course, you could even go to the south rim of the Grand Canyon too. It's a little bit busier, but it's still the Grand Canyon. So I mean, there's so many additions that you could add on. But that would be my main recommendation, is to maybe do it at the end of your trip. That way, you've got your energy, you're organized for our photo expedition, and then after, it's just all, it's cherry on top. Get a rental car. You will need a rental car. Things are pretty spaced out there. But then again, St. George is such a good jumping off spot. You can go and hit up all these amazing parts of the American Southwest.
Great. Thanks for the great advice, Jen. Unfortunately, that is going to be the last question that we do have time for today. So I'd like to throw it back to you for any closing comments you may have for us.
Okay, thanks, Rob. No, just again, I wanted to say thanks everyone for tuning in. I really do appreciate your interest in this. And again, if you have questions going forward, some of those resources I listed are wonderful. This again is going to be recorded and available afterwards, so you can revisit those resources. Or our adventure concierge in the office at NatHab are also a just wonderful resource. More than happy to help answer questions. But no, thank you again for tuning in, and thank you for your questions. And I can't wait. Hopefully, I'll see you out in the field and canyons with a camera in your hand. Can't wait.
Jen, thank you so much for taking the time to present for us today. And I'd also like to thank everyone who tuned in today. Now, if you are interested in information on how you can travel with NatHab, please give us a call on the number on your screen, or you could send us an email at info@nathab.com. Our adventure specialists are happy to help you out. Join us tomorrow for our next daily dose of nature. You can check out this week's lineup, including registration links, on our website at nathap.com/webinars. We did record today's presentation, and we will have the replay available on our website soon. With that, I will conclude today's webinar. Goodbye, everybody. We'll see you next time.